Hello, welcome to the presentation on the Mennonite Church in the U.S. Uh, I'm going to share my screen here to start the presentation. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the Mennonite Church USA, and I've titled this presentation, Agents of Peace in God's Kingdom on Earth. The Mennonite Church USA, I think, provides a highly informative case study of how liturgies are shaped by our ultimate love. I like this quote from Jamie Smith's book, and I've placed it here just so that you can keep this in mind as we go through the information that I've collected about the Mennonite Church. And Jamie Smith says, liturgies shape and constitute our identities by forming our most fundamental desires and our most basic attunement to the world. Liturgies make us certain kinds of people, and what defines us is what we love. Throughout this presentation, and as demonstrated in my title, I really believe that peace is the ultimate driving love of the Mennonites. So in this presentation, I'll be considering how the Mennonite Church USA orients itself towards peace through rituals and liturgies. In order to achieve this goal, I will consider three main facets of the Mennonite Church USA. First, I will discuss its history, considering its alignment with the Anabaptist tradition, and I will outline their distinctive core beliefs. Second, I will consider some of the rituals of the Mennonite Church emerging from my participant observer experiences at Columbus Mennonite Church in Columbus, Ohio. Finally, I'll discuss some of the major challenges facing the Mennonite Church USA based on my interview with Reverend Josué Contreras, pastor of Iglesia Mennonita Puerta de Salvación in La Joya, Texas, on the Texas-Mexico border. So let's go into the presentation then and talk a little bit about history. The Mennonite Church USA stands proudly in the Anabaptist tradition. I found the following declaration on their website, www.mennoniteusa.org, which says, "We are neither Catholic nor Protestant, but we share ties to those streams of Christianity. We cooperate as a sign of our unity in Christ and in ways that extend the reign of God's kingdom on earth. We are known as Anabaptists, not anti-Baptists, meaning rebaptizers." The Mennonite Church USA is probably one of the youngest Anabaptist groups. It was formed in 1995 as the result of a merger between several smaller Anabaptist and Mennonite groups. Despite their youth, they proudly trace their history back to the 16th century and identify with the teachings of Menno Simons. The core beliefs of the Mennonite Church USA are articulated in the Confession of Faith in Mennonite Perspective. In analyzing this document, I was struck by the ubiquity of the concept of peace throughout the document. I've listed some of the distinctive core beliefs on the slide. Notice that the commitment to peace involves environmental stewardship and responsibility, rejection of political pursuits, nonconformity to the world, rejection of violence in any form, and utter dependence on God and God's love for protection. So how are these core beliefs embodied in practice? In my visits to Columbus Mennonite, the commitment to peace was apparent to me even as I approached the building. What you see on the slide before you is a picture of what's called the Garden of Peace. The Garden of Peace sits right next to the main entrance of the church building. It's a public space for reflection, for contemplation, and for experiencing the peace of God. It is marked off by the pole that you see to the left. The words, "May peace prevail on the earth," stand out on this pole. And each side of the pole expresses this visceral desire in a different language, in Chinese, in Arabic, in Spanish, and in English. As I approached the door to the building, I was struck by the following words clearly displayed on the door: "Pray for peace, act for peace." Peace is not only something that we hope for, as expressed out in the garden, but it's also something that we pursue actively. This phrase, "act for peace." In the service, the pastor first asked all of the congregants to be silent in a moment of peace, and then asked everyone to pass the peace of Christ to their neighbor. I was greeted by at least 20 different people with the words, "The peace of Christ, the peace of Christ, the peace of Christ." The rituals of the church certainly elevate the desire of peace to the highest place. I was surprised how the desire for peace wasn't simply talked about, but rather it permeated the entire place, both in spatial and in social practices. So let's move on to a discussion of some of the challenges. In my interview with Pastor Josue, I was able to uncover many challenges facing the Mennonite Church USA. I asked specifically about the practice of changing the confession, and Pastor Josue responded that changing the confession is not a common practice in the Anabaptist tradition. He said that a changed confession normally responds to the formation of a new denominational identity and rarely deals with pressing social issues. He told me that the Mennonites have a system of resolutions and agenda setting that allows them to deal with social issues directly without the need to change the confession. Recent resolutions, he pointed out, have opposed the war in Iraq, have advocated for universal health care, and have repudiated the U.S. Army's use of the island of Vieques for military exercise. The Mennonite Church, he insists, does not shy away from confronting the government. He told me one story that involved his own congregation. In 2007, President George W. Bush ordered the construction of a border fence along the Texas-Mexico border. The church owned a property along the Rio Grande River in Los Ebanos, Texas. The federal government approached the church to purchase the land, and Pastor Josue recalls how the congregation objected to the construction of the wall because they viewed it as a sign contrary to the principles of peace of the Mennonite Church. They resisted the federal government for several years. Local politicians put mounting pressures on the church to sell the land. In the end, the government seized the land and offered compensation to the church. The church, however, refused the money, and this goes to show again this commitment to the peace of Christ and passing the peace of Christ along, avoiding these adversarial and confrontational symbols such as a border fence. The most significant challenge facing the Mennonite Church USA today is really the question of same-sex marriage. This is a hot button issue, not so much because of its social and political currency that all of us recognize, but rather because its adoption requires a substantive change within the Mennonite confession. The Mennonite Church USA has left it up to each congregation whether or not they desire to be LGBT inclusive. In fact, Columbus Mennonite Church, the church that I visited, views itself as an LGBT inclusive congregation, and in fact mentions that every time that they can. The recognition of same-sex marriage, however, is a step further and thus is currently under intense debates within the denomination. Pastor Josue's view is that the issue may very well tear the denomination apart. So some of the lessons that I've learned in this project, I really enjoyed working on the project. I was able to see a sharp contrast between what I read in the Belgic Confession about the Anabaptists and the way that those in the Anabaptist tradition currently live in the world. I was constantly reminded of Isaiah's prophecy in Isaiah 9, 6, and 7 while doing this project, and I placed that on the slide for you. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be on his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end. I think that all Christians can learn from the Mennonites. We can learn that we should be committed to the only true peace, the peace of Jesus Christ, and that we should be reluctant to follow human approximations to peace, which often are no peace at all. Thank you.